My name is Victoria, and I am 32 years old. Last Christmas, my father humiliated me in front of our entire family, declaring I would never inherit a single dollar because I was a disappointment who chose career over family. What he did not know was that I had just closed a deal that would make me one of the youngest billionaires in America. 6 months later, when my face appeared on the Forbes cover, everything changed. But by then, it was already too late for him. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this incredible story of family karma and sweet revenge, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and do not forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more jaw-dropping family drama stories. Trust me, you will not want to miss what happens when family betrayal meets ultimate success. Let us get started. The Whitmore family Christmas dinner had always been a grand affair. Our colonial mansion in Connecticut was decorated to perfection, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over mahogany furniture and family portraits dating back 5 generations. My stepmother Elena had outdone herself with the decorations, though I suspected it was more about impressing the neighbors than creating genuine holiday warmth. I arrived that evening, feeling accomplished and excited. 3 days earlier, I had finalized the acquisition of a revolutionary biotech company that would change cancer treatment forever. The deal was worth $3.7 billion, and I owned 60% of the merged entity. My investment firm, Sterling Dynamics, had quietly become one of the most powerful forces in the industry. But I had kept my success private, preferring to let my work speak for itself rather than seeking publicity. My father, Richard Whitmore, greeted me with his usual cold handshake. At 68, he still commanded attention with his silver hair and piercing blue eyes. He had built Whitmore Industries from a small manufacturing company into a moderately successful regional business, though it paled in comparison to what I had achieved. My stepmother Elena, whom he had married 5 years after my mother's death, smiled her practiced smile and air-kissed me without actually making contact. My half-siblings were already gathered in the living room. Marcus, 28, worked as a mid-level manager at Dad's company and had never shown an ounce of ambition beyond collecting his paycheck. Sophia, 25, was a social media influencer with a modest following who spent most of her time shopping and posting selfies. They had always been the golden children, while I was viewed as the black sheep for pursuing my own path instead of joining the family business. During cocktails, I listened to the usual family gossip. Aunt Margaret was complaining about her divorce settlement, while Uncle James boasted about his latest golf tournament win. My father held court in his leather armchair, discussing his plans to expand the business into new markets. He had always been the patriarch who demanded respect and obedience, and anyone who challenged his authority faced his wrath. As we moved to the dining room, I noticed Elena whispering something to my father. Her expression was calculating, and I caught fragments of their conversation about finally putting Victoria in her place and teaching her about family loyalty. A chill ran down my spine, but I pushed aside my unease and took my usual seat at the far end of the table. The dinner conversation flowed normally at first. We discussed current events, family updates, and holiday plans. I shared some general details about my work, though I kept the specifics of my recent success to myself. My father seemed distracted, barely acknowledging my contributions to the conversation. Then, as Elena served dessert, my father stood up and cleared his throat. The room fell silent, as it always did when he prepared to make one of his pronouncements. "I have an important announcement to make," he began, his voice carrying its familiar authoritative tone. "As you all know, I have been thinking about my legacy and how to ensure the family business continues to thrive for future generations." I felt a flutter of anticipation. Despite our differences, I had always assumed I would inherit at least a portion of his estate. After all, I was his eldest child and had achieved significant success in the business world. "I have decided to update my will," he continued, his gaze sweeping across the table before settling on me with unmistakable coldness. "The entirety of my estate, including Whitmore Industries, my property holdings, and all financial assets, will be divided equally between Marcus and Sophia." The room erupted in surprised murmurs, but my father raised his hand for silence. My heart began to pound as I realized what was coming next. Victoria, he said, his voice growing harder, you will receive nothing. You chose to abandon this family when you decided your career was more important than supporting the business I built. You have shown no loyalty, no respect for tradition, and no understanding of what family means. You made your bed when you walked away from us, and now you can lie in it. The words hit me like physical blows. Around the table, I saw a mixture of shock and satisfaction on my relatives' faces. Elena was barely concealing her triumph while Marcus and Sophia exchanged gleeful looks. Aunt Margaret had the decency to appear uncomfortable, but Uncle James was nodding in approval. Furthermore, my father continued, clearly enjoying my stunned silence. I want everyone here to understand that Victoria is no longer welcome at family gatherings or business discussions. She has made it clear that she considers herself above this family, so she can live with the consequences of that choice. I sat frozen, my mind reeling from the public humiliation. This was not just about inheritance. It was about being completely excommunicated from my own family. The cruelty of doing this at Christmas dinner in front of everyone felt intentionally designed to cause maximum pain. Dad, I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. I never abandoned this family. I built my own business because I wanted to prove myself, not because I did not care about you. He laughed bitterly. Prove yourself. You have been running around playing entrepreneur while ignoring your responsibilities here. You think you are so successful, but you will never amount to anything without family support. Now you will learn what it really means to be on your own. Elena reached over and placed her hand on his arm, a gesture that spoke volumes about who had influenced this decision. I realized that this had been planned, orchestrated to humiliate me and solidify her children's position as the heirs. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced conversation and sideways glances. I excused myself early, claiming I had work commitments the next day. No one tried to stop me or soften the blow of what had just happened. As I drove home through the snowy Connecticut countryside, tears blurred my vision. The man who had raised me, who had taught me about business and determination, had just disowned me publicly and cruelly. What hurt most was not the money but the complete rejection of everything I had worked to achieve. Little did my father know that in 3 days, I would receive a call from Forbes magazine, requesting an interview for their upcoming Youngest Billionaires issue. Little did he know that his disappointing daughter was about to become one of the most powerful women in America. And little did he know that his public humiliation of me would soon become the biggest mistake of his life. The drive back to my penthouse in Manhattan gave me 2 hours to process what had just happened. By the time I reached the city, my initial shock and hurt had crystallized into something much more dangerous: cold, calculating fury. I had built my entire career on strategic thinking and long-term planning. Now I would apply those same skills to dealing with my family's betrayal. I spent the next 3 days in my home office, analyzing my father's business with the same methodical approach I used for potential acquisitions. Whitmore Industries was worth approximately $50 million on paper, but I quickly discovered some interesting vulnerabilities. The company relied heavily on 3 major contracts that were up for renewal within the next 18 months. More importantly, 2 of their biggest clients were companies where I had significant influence through my investment network. My assistant Sarah called on December 28th with news that would change everything. "Victoria, I just got off the phone with Forbes magazine," she said, barely containing her excitement. "They want to feature you as the cover story for their 30 Under 30 Billionaires issue. Apparently word has leaked about the biotech acquisition, and they have confirmed your net worth at $4.2 billion. They want to do a full interview and photo shoot next week." I set down my coffee cup with steady hands, though my heart was racing. Did they mention when the issue would be published? February 15th? They are calling it their Power Women edition, and you are going to be the youngest person ever featured on their billionaire list. After hanging up, I sat in my office overlooking Central Park and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. My father had humiliated me for being a disappointment who would never amount to anything. In 6 weeks, the entire world would know exactly how wrong he had been. But I was not content to simply prove him wrong. He had not just rejected me. He had done it publicly and cruelly, designed to cause maximum humiliation. Elena had orchestrated it to secure her children's inheritance, and my half-siblings had participated gleefully in my degradation. They had declared war on me, and now they would learn what it meant to fight someone with virtually unlimited resources and nothing left to lose. I began with research. Using my network of investigators and financial analysts, I commissioned a complete audit of Whitmore Industries. What I discovered was fascinating and useful. The company was profitable but heavily leveraged, with most of its value tied up in real estate and equipment. My father had been taking significant distributions to fund his and Elena's lavish lifestyle, leaving the business vulnerable to any sudden downturns. More interestingly, I learned that Elena had been systematically positioning herself and her children for maximum benefit. She had convinced my father to make her the beneficiary of his life insurance policies, and had been slowly isolating him from old friends and business associates who might have defended me. Marcus and Sophia were already being groomed to take over the business despite having no real qualifications or experience. My next step was to secure allies. I reached out to my mother's side of the family, whom my father had gradually distanced himself from after remarrying. My maternal uncle David, a respected attorney in Boston, was appalled when I told him about the Christmas dinner incident. "Victoria, I always suspected Elena was manipulating your father, but I never imagined it would go this far," he said during our lunch meeting. "Your mother would be heartbroken to see how he has treated you." Uncle David agreed to help me in whatever way necessary. He had maintained relationships with several of my father's long-term business associates, and could provide valuable intelligence about company operations and family dynamics. I also contacted my mother's best friend, Catherine Morrison, who had remained close to me despite my father's disapproval. Catherine was a prominent figure in Connecticut society and had significant influence in the business community. When I explained what had happened, she was both shocked and furious. "Richard has completely lost his way," she told me. "Your mother would never have allowed this to happen. Elena has poisoned him against you, and now she is going to destroy everything your mother helped build." Catherine offered to be my eyes and ears in Connecticut society, monitoring how the family's behavior was being perceived in their social circles. My final preparation involved my business relationships. I quietly began conversations with my contacts at Whitmore Industries' major client companies. I did not reveal my family connection, but I started asking strategic questions about their vendor relationships and future contract negotiations. Through my investment firm, I also began acquiring small positions in companies that competed directly with Whitmore Industries. Nothing large enough to attract attention, but enough to give me influence over pricing and market dynamics in their sector. As January progressed, I received regular updates from my various sources. Elena was already planning renovations to the family home and discussing expensive vacation plans. Marcus was bragging to friends about his upcoming inheritance and had started spending money he had not yet received. Sophia had bought a new luxury car and was posting about her family's success on social media. My father, meanwhile, seemed to be having some second thoughts. Catherine reported that he had been asking mutual friends about my business activities, and had looked genuinely surprised when someone mentioned seeing my name in a Wall Street Journal article about emerging venture capital leaders. "I think part of him is starting to realize he might have underestimated you," Catherine told me during one of our conversations. "But Elena keeps reassuring him that he made the right choice, and she has been working overtime to prevent him from having any contact with people who might defend you." The Forbes photo shoot took place in late January at my office. The photographer captured me in my element, standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, wearing a sharp navy suit with financial charts and acquisition documents visible on my desk behind me. The interviewer was fascinated by my story of building a billion-dollar empire while flying under the radar. "Most people at your level of success crave publicity," the journalist noted. "Why have you been so private about your achievements?" "I believe in letting results speak for themselves," I replied. "Success is not about recognition, it is about impact. I have been focused on building something meaningful, rather than building a personal brand." The irony was not lost on me that within weeks my desire for privacy would be permanently shattered, but it would serve a purpose my father never could have imagined. As February approached, I finalized my preparations. I had my allies in place, my intelligence network established, and my business strategies ready to deploy. Most importantly, I had something my father and his new family would never expect: patience, resources, and a plan that would systematically dismantle everything they thought they had secured through their betrayal. They had made the mistake of thinking they were destroying a desperate daughter begging for acceptance. Instead, they had awakened something far more dangerous: a billionaire with nothing left to lose and every reason to seek justice. February 14th arrived with an irony that felt almost poetic. While the rest of the country was celebrating Valentine's Day, I was preparing to deliver a very different kind of message to my family. The Forbes issue would hit newsstands the next morning, and I had spent weeks positioning myself for maximum impact when the revelation finally reached them. That evening, I hosted a small dinner party at my penthouse for my closest allies and advisors. Uncle David had driven down from Boston, and Catherine had come in from Connecticut. My business partner and closest friend Amanda Chen was there as well. Amanda had been my roommate at Harvard Business School and had become the CFO of Sterling Dynamics when I started the company. She was one of the few people who knew the complete story of my family dynamics and had been furious about the Christmas dinner incident. "Tomorrow changes everything," Amanda said as we reviewed our final preparations. "Once this hits, there's no going back to the way things were." Uncle David nodded gravely. "Are you absolutely certain you want to go through with the full plan? Once you start moving against Whitmore Industries, this becomes about more than just family drama." I looked out at the glittering city lights below us and thought about my father's words: "You will never amount to anything without family support." Tomorrow he would learn exactly how much I had amounted to without his help, but more importantly, he would begin to understand the consequences of underestimating someone with my resources and determination. "They made their choice when they decided to humiliate me publicly," I replied. "I am not just going to prove them wrong. I am going to show them what real power looks like." Catherine had been monitoring the family's activities and provided disturbing updates. Elena had been systematically erasing traces of my mother from the family home, donating her belongings to charity, and removing her photographs from prominent display. My half-siblings were already acting like the inheritance was theirs, with Marcus putting a deposit on a new boat and Sophia planning an expensive European vacation. Most troubling, Catherine had learned that Elena was pushing my father to make the disinheritance legally ironclad. She was pressuring him to issue a public statement about my abandonment of the family and to create legal barriers that would prevent me from contesting the will in the future. "She wants to make sure you can never come back even if you tried," Catherine explained. "Elena is paranoid that you might eventually reconcile with your father and reclaim your inheritance." Amanda had been working her contacts in the financial media, ensuring that the Forbes story would get maximum coverage. She had also been coordinating with our legal team to prepare for the business moves we would make once my net worth became public knowledge. "The acquisition opportunities are already lined up," she reported. 3 of Whitmore Industries' suppliers are struggling financially and would be open to buyout offers. If we move quickly, we can control a significant portion of their supply chain within 60 days. Uncle David had been preparing the legal groundwork for more direct action. Through his network of attorney contacts, he had identified several potential regulatory issues with Whitmore Industries that could be brought to the attention of appropriate authorities if necessary. "Your father has been cutting corners on environmental compliance to maximize profits," he explained. "Nothing criminal, but enough to trigger expensive investigations and potential fines if someone were to file the right complaints." As the evening progressed, we refined our timeline. Phase 1 would begin immediately after the Forbes article created public awareness of my wealth and success. This would involve strategic business moves designed to put pressure on Whitmore Industries while maintaining plausible deniability about my personal motivations. Phase 2 would escalate if my father and Elena continued their campaign against me. This would involve more direct action, including potential acquisition attempts and legal challenges to their business practices. Phase 3 was reserved for worst-case scenarios, where we would move to completely dismantle their financial security and social standing in the Connecticut community. The key is graduated response, Uncle David emphasized. You want to give them opportunities to recognize their mistake and seek reconciliation before you destroy them completely. But even as he said it, I could see in his eyes that he understood my father's pride and Elena's influence would likely prevent any such reconciliation. They had committed themselves to a path that would inevitably lead to their destruction. The next morning, I woke up before dawn and went for a run through Central Park. As I jogged past the reservoir, I thought about my mother and what she would have thought about the situation. She had always taught me that success was its own reward, but she had also been fierce in protecting her family from those who would harm them. I believed she would have understood what I was about to do. By 8 a.m., I was in my office when Sarah rushed in with the first copy of the Forbes issue. There I was on the cover, Victoria Sterling, the invisible billionaire who built an empire in secret. The photograph showed me looking confident and powerful with the Manhattan skyline behind me. Inside, the 6-page feature detailed my rise from venture capital analyst to billionaire entrepreneur, with particular focus on the biotech acquisition that had pushed my net worth into the billions. The article painted me as a strategic genius who had avoided publicity while building one of the most successful investment firms in the country. It detailed my education, my early investments, and my philosophy of transformative capitalism, focused on companies that could solve major global problems while generating massive returns. Amanda called within minutes of the magazine hitting the stands. The phone has not stopped ringing, she said excitedly. Bloomberg wants an interview, CNBC is requesting a live appearance, and the Wall Street Journal wants to do a profile on your investment strategy. But I was more interested in the reaction from Connecticut. Catherine had stationed herself at the country club where my father had breakfast every Friday morning with his business associates. She would observe his reaction when he first saw the magazine and report back immediately. By 10 a.m., the financial news websites had picked up the story. Mystery billionaire revealed Victoria Sterling's secret empire was trending on social media. My company's website was experiencing unprecedented traffic, and Amanda reported that several major clients were reaching out to discuss expanded partnerships. Then at 10:45 a.m., my phone rang with a number I recognized immediately. My father was calling for the first time since Christmas dinner. I let it go to voicemail. 5 minutes later, he called again, then again. By noon, he had left 8 increasingly frantic voicemails, progressing from confusion to anger to something that sounded almost like panic. Catherine called with her report from the country club. Victoria, you should have seen his face. He was having coffee with the Hendersons and the Michaels when someone brought over the Forbes magazine. He went completely white, then red, then white again. He kept staring at your photo and rereading the article. Finally, he got up and left without saying a word to anyone. She paused before continuing. The other men at the table were talking about how impressed they were with your success. Tom Henderson said he had always known you were special and that your father should be incredibly proud. The irony was lost on no one. That afternoon, Marcus called, then Sophia, then Elena. Each call went to voicemail, and each voicemail revealed their growing desperation as they began to understand the magnitude of what they had dismissed and rejected. But I was not ready to speak to any of them yet. They had chosen to humiliate me publicly, and now they would experience their own public humiliation as the business community learned about their treatment of someone who had become one of the most successful entrepreneurs in this country. The real work was just beginning, and I wanted them to fully absorb the reality of their situation before I made my first move. They needed to understand that their casual cruelty had awakened something far more powerful than they had ever imagined, and that their comfortable world was about to change forever. The war had begun, and I held all the weapons. The weekend following the Forbes revelation was strategic silence. While my phone buzzed constantly with calls from my father's family, I focused on implementing the first phase of my plan. By Monday morning, Sterling Dynamics had quietly acquired controlling interests in 2 of Whitmore Industries' key suppliers and had initiated discussions with their 3 largest clients about exploring new vendor relationships. Amanda coordinated our moves with military precision. Morrison Materials just accepted our buyout offer, she reported during our Monday morning briefing. That gives us control over 60% of Whitmore's raw material supply. Patterson Logistics is considering our acquisition proposal for their trucking division, which handles all of Whitmore's distribution. Uncle David had been busy as well. I filed the environmental compliance complaints this morning, he informed me. The state regulatory board will be conducting surprise inspections within the next 2 weeks. Nothing your father cannot handle, but it will be expensive and time-consuming. But the most satisfying development came from an unexpected source. Catherine called Tuesday afternoon with news that made me smile for the first time since Christmas. The Fairfield Country Club board met yesterday, she said, barely containing her amusement. Apparently, several members have been asking pointed questions about how the club could have overlooked having a Forbes cover billionaire in their community. There is talk about offering you an honorary membership and possibly asking you to speak at their annual gala. The irony was exquisite. The same social circle that had witnessed my father's rejection of me was now clamoring to associate themselves with my success. Elena, meanwhile, was beginning to panic. Catherine reported that she had been making frantic calls to family friends, trying to gauge how much damage the Forbes article had done to their social standing. She had also been pressuring my father to reach out to business contacts who might have connections to me. She realizes that alienating a billionaire might have been a tactical error, Catherine observed dryly. Wednesday brought the first direct confrontation. My father appeared at Sterling Dynamics offices without an appointment, demanding to see me. Security called up to my office, and I instructed them to have him wait in the lobby while I finished my current meeting. I wanted him to sit there for 45 minutes, surrounded by the obvious symbols of my success, before I decided whether to see him at all. When I finally agreed to meet with him, he looked older than I remembered. The confident patriarch who had humiliated me at Christmas dinner was gone, replaced by a man who clearly understood he had made a catastrophic mistake. "Victoria," he began, his voice lacking its usual authority, "I think we need to talk about what happened at Christmas." I gestured for him to sit across from my desk while I remained standing, a deliberate power dynamic that was not lost on either of us. Behind me, floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Manhattan, while my office walls displayed framed articles about my business successes and photographs of me with world leaders and industry titans. "What specifically would you like to discuss?" I asked coolly. "The part where you disinherited me for being a disappointment, or the part where you told me I would never amount to anything?" He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I may have been hasty in my judgment. Elena had been telling me that you were not interested in maintaining family relationships, and I believed her assessment of the situation." "Elena," I repeated, letting the name hang in the air. "The woman who has been systematically erasing my mother's memory from your home while positioning her children to inherit everything my mother helped you build." His face flushed. "That is not fair, Victoria. Elena has been a devoted wife and mother. Devoted to securing her children's future at the expense of your actual daughter," I replied. "Tell me, Dad, what has Marcus accomplished in his 28 years that qualifies him to inherit a $50 million company? What business experience does Sophia have beyond posting selfies on Instagram?" He had no answer to that, which spoke volumes about how little he had actually considered the consequences of his decision. "I want to fix this," he said finally. "Maybe we can revisit the will, find a way to include you appropriately." I walked around my desk and sat down, leaning back in my chair as I studied his face. "You want to fix this because you discovered I am worth $4 billion. Where was this desire for reconciliation when you thought I was just your struggling daughter who needed family support?" "That is not entirely fair," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "What is not fair," I said, my voice growing harder, "is discovering that your father values you so little that he would publicly humiliate you in front of your entire family. What is not fair is learning that your stepmother has been plotting to erase your mother's legacy. What is not fair is having your half-siblings celebrate your disinheritance like it was a personal victory." I leaned forward, making sure he understood the gravity of what I was about to say. "You declared war on me, Dad. You made it clear that I was not part of your family anymore. So now you get to live with the consequences of that decision." His face went pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you taught me an important lesson about loyalty and family. You showed me that blood relationships mean nothing if they are not built on mutual respect and genuine love. So I am building my own family now, with people who value me for who I am rather than what I can do for them." I stood up, indicating that our meeting was over. "You should also know that several of your business relationships are about to become more complicated. It turns out that having a billionaire daughter you publicly rejected creates some interesting dynamics in the business community." As he left my office, I could see the fear in his eyes. He was beginning to understand that this was not just about hurt feelings or family drama. This was about power, and he had just discovered that he had far less of it than he had believed. That evening, I received a long, rambling voicemail from Elena. She alternated between attempts at reconciliation and barely veiled threats about family loyalty and legal consequences. Her desperation was evident, and I could hear the panic in her voice as she realized that her carefully constructed plan was crumbling. Marcus and Sophia left similar messages, suddenly eager to rebuild relationships they had never valued. Marcus even offered to help me with my business, apparently unaware of how insulting that suggestion was, coming from someone whose greatest professional achievement was managing a small regional sales territory. But I was not interested in their panic or their belated attempts at family harmony. They had made their choice when they participated gleefully in my humiliation. Now they would learn what it meant to be on the wrong side of someone who had built an empire through strategic thinking and relentless execution. The takedown was just beginning, and I had resources they could not even imagine. They wanted to play family politics with someone who had conquered international markets. They were about to discover just how outmatched they really were. The following week brought a cascade of consequences that even I had not fully anticipated. The business community's reaction to my family situation was swift and brutal. Word had spread quickly through Connecticut's tight-knit corporate circles about how Richard Whitmore had treated his billionaire daughter, and the social and professional ramifications were devastating. Catherine provided daily updates that were both satisfying and somewhat shocking in their severity. "The Hendersons canceled their planned joint venture with your father," she reported Tuesday morning. Apparently, Tom Henderson told his wife about the Christmas dinner incident, and she was so appalled that she insisted they distance themselves from the family entirely. The country club situation had escalated beyond anything I had expected. Not only were they discussing honorary membership for me, but several longtime members were questioning my father's continued membership. The club prided itself on attracting successful business leaders, and having publicly rejected and humiliated one of the youngest billionaires in America was being viewed as a serious lapse in judgment. Amanda coordinated our business moves with increasing effectiveness. "Patterson Logistics accepted our acquisition offer," she announced during our Wednesday briefing. "That gives us complete control over Whitmore Industries' supply chain and distribution network. They are now dependent on companies we own for both raw materials and shipping. But the most significant development came from an unexpected direction. Harrison Industries, Whitmore's largest client, had reached out directly to Sterling Dynamics about potential investment opportunities. Harrison represented 40% of Whitmore Industries' annual revenue, and their CEO had apparently been impressed by my Forbes profile. "Richard Harrison wants to meet with you about a possible partnership," Amanda explained. "He mentioned that he had always respected your business acumen and was surprised to learn about your family connection to Whitmore Industries." I agreed to the meeting, knowing that Harrison's endorsement would further legitimize my position in the Connecticut business community, while simultaneously undermining my father's standing. The environmental compliance inspections had begun, and as Uncle David had predicted, they were revealing years of cost-cutting measures that skirted regulatory requirements. Nothing criminal, but enough to require expensive remediation and ongoing monitoring. "The fines will probably total around $800,000, Uncle David reported. "More importantly, the ongoing compliance requirements will add significant operational costs going forward." Elena was becoming increasingly desperate. Catherine had witnessed her at several social gatherings, trying unsuccessfully to control the narrative about our family situation. Her attempts to portray me as an ungrateful daughter were falling flat in light of my obvious success and the growing understanding of how I had been treated. She tried to tell Margaret Patterson that you had been difficult and demanding, Catherine recounted. Margaret just looked at her and said that any parent should be proud to have raised such a successful daughter. Elena turned bright red and excused herself from the conversation. My half-siblings were facing their own social consequences. Marcus had been bragging about his inheritance at various bars and business events, but now those same people were questioning his qualifications and wondering aloud how he had earned such a windfall while his accomplished sister had been disinherited. Sophia was discovering that her social media presence, which had previously been ignored or mildly annoying to her followers, was now being scrutinized through the lens of family dynamics. Comments on her posts increasingly asked about her relationship with her famous sister, and questioned her character based on her apparent participation in my rejection. But the most dramatic development occurred Thursday evening, when I received an unexpected call from my father's longtime business partner and closest friend, Robert Chen. Robert had been my father's best man at his wedding to my mother and had known me since childhood. "Victoria," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment, "I need you to know that many of us who knew and loved your mother are appalled by what happened at Christmas. Your father has lost his way, and Elena has been poisoning his judgment for years." Robert had been conducting his own investigation into the family dynamics and had discovered some disturbing information about Elena's influence over my father's business decisions. "She has been systematically isolating him from old friends and advisors," Robert explained. "Anyone who might have defended you or questioned her children's qualifications has been gradually pushed out of his inner circle. I think she has been planning this disinheritance for years, waiting for the right opportunity to execute it." More shocking, Robert had learned that Elena had been actively working to undermine my business relationships in Connecticut, spreading rumors about my reliability and character to potential clients and partners. "She told several people that you were unstable and difficult to work with," Robert revealed. "Fortunately, most people who actually knew you dismissed her comments, but she has been trying to damage your reputation for months." This revelation transformed my understanding of the situation. What I had viewed as a spontaneous act of cruelty was actually the culmination of a long-term campaign to isolate me from my father and secure her children's inheritance. Armed with this new information, I decided to accelerate my timeline. Friday morning, I instructed Amanda to proceed with Phase 2 of our plan. "Make the acquisition offer," I told her. $55 million for Whitmore Industries, $5 million above fair market value. Structure it as a hostile takeover if they refuse initial negotiations." Amanda smiled grimly. "That will certainly get their attention. When do you want to submit the offer this afternoon?" "I want them to spend the weekend contemplating their options." Uncle David had prepared the legal framework for the acquisition attempt, ensuring that all securities regulations would be followed precisely. We would be acquiring Whitmore Industries not for revenge, but as a legitimate business opportunity that happened to come with personal satisfaction. The acquisition offer was delivered by courier Friday at 4 p.m. According to Catherine, who had positioned herself to observe the family's reaction, my father went into immediate crisis mode when he opened the envelope. "He called an emergency family meeting for tonight," Catherine reported. Elena looked like she had seen a ghost when he showed her the paperwork. That evening, I hosted another dinner party for my allies and supporters. This time, the guest list included Robert Chen and several other family friends who had reached out to express their support. The conversation centered on my mother's legacy and how proud she would have been of my achievements. "She always said you had the strongest character of any child she knew," Robert reminisced. "She would have been heartbroken by what happened at Christmas, but she would have been incredibly proud of how you have handled yourself since then." As we raised our glasses in a toast to my mother's memory, I realized that I had already achieved something more valuable than revenge. I had built a chosen family of people who valued and supported me unconditionally, while exposing the true nature of the people who had rejected me. The weekend would bring their response to my acquisition offer, but regardless of their decision, I had already won the larger war. They had tried to destroy my sense of belonging and self-worth, but instead they had freed me to become someone stronger and more successful than I had ever imagined possible. Monday morning brought their response, and it was everything I had hoped for and more. My father rejected the acquisition offer with a letter so filled with rage and desperation that it revealed just how completely he had lost control of the situation. But more importantly, the rejection came with an ultimatum that would prove to be his final and most costly mistake. If you withdraw this hostile takeover attempt immediately and issue a public apology for your vindictive behavior, his letter read, we might consider restoring you to the family and including you in the inheritance discussions. I read the letter aloud to Amanda and Uncle David, and we all burst into laughter at the sheer audacity of his position. He was offering to consider restoring me to a family that had publicly humiliated me in exchange for abandoning a legitimate business acquisition and apologizing for my success. He still does not understand who has the power in this relationship, Amanda observed. He thinks he can negotiate from a position of strength when he is actually completely vulnerable. Uncle David was more direct. He just gave you legal justification for proceeding with the hostile takeover. That letter proves this is about personal animus rather than business considerations, which actually strengthens your position if this goes to court. But I had already moved beyond the acquisition. Over the weekend, I had received a better offer from Harrison Industries, who wanted to buy Whitmore's client contracts and key personnel while leaving the family to deal with the debt regulatory issues and declining assets. Richard Harrison called yesterday, I explained to my team. He wants to hire Marcus and Sophia as junior executives at generous salaries, then systematically acquire Whitmore's market share over the next 18 months. It is a cleaner solution that achieves the same result. This approach would allow Harrison Industries to expand their operations while giving my half-siblings face-saving positions that they were marginally qualified to fill. My father would be forced to sell his company piecemeal while watching his former competitors hire away his children and take over his market. The beauty of the Harrison solution was its appearance of generosity. To outside observers, it would look like I had arranged good jobs for my half-siblings despite their treatment of me. The reality was that Marcus and Sophia would be junior employees at a company that was systematically dismantling their father's legacy, but most people would only see the surface kindness. Wednesday brought the most satisfying moment of the entire ordeal. Elena appeared at my office alone and clearly desperate. Security called up to announce her arrival, and I decided to see her curious about what final gambit she might attempt. She looked older than I remembered, and her usual polished appearance was slightly frayed around the edges. The confident woman who had orchestrated my humiliation had been replaced by someone who understood that her carefully constructed plans were falling apart. Victoria, she began attempting to project her old authority. I think there has been a serious misunderstanding about our family situation. I gestured for her to sit while I remained standing, the same power dynamic I had used with my father. What misunderstanding would that be, Elena? Your father loves you very much, she said, her voice taking on a pleading quality. He was hurt and confused by your distance from the family, and he made some statements he regrets. We want to work together to repair these relationships. I walked to the window and looked out at the city below before responding. Elena, I know about your campaign to isolate me from my father. I know about the lies you spread regarding my business relationships. I know about your systematic efforts to erase my mother's memory from our family home. Her face went pale, but she maintained her composure. I do not know what you think you know, but you are clearly getting bad information from people who want to cause trouble for our family. Robert Chen is hardly someone who wants to cause trouble, I replied. Neither are the dozen other family friends who have reached out to share their observations about your behavior over the past 5 years. I turned back to face her directly. You made a strategic error, Elena. You assumed that controlling my father would give you control over the entire situation, but you failed to account for the possibility that the daughter you were working to eliminate might have her own power and resources. She stood up, her mask of conciliation finally slipping. You cannot destroy this family just because your feelings were hurt. Marcus and Sophia do not deserve to suffer for your vindictiveness. Marcus and Sophia participated gleefully in my humiliation, I replied calmly. They celebrated my disinheritance like a personal victory. Now they get to live with the consequences of that choice. As she left my office, I could see that she finally understood the magnitude of what she had unleashed. Her plan to secure her children's inheritance had instead created a situation where their future depended entirely on my mercy. That evening, I hosted what would become a monthly tradition, a family dinner for my chosen family. Uncle David and Catherine were there, along with Amanda, Robert Chen, and several other friends and mentors who had supported me throughout this ordeal. To families we choose and families we create, Robert offered as a toast, raising his glass toward a photograph of my mother that I had prominently displayed in my dining room. As we shared stories about my mother and discussed plans for a scholarship foundation in her name, I realized that the Christmas dinner humiliation had been a gift in disguise. It had forced me to distinguish between relationships based on obligation and relationships based on genuine love and respect. 3 months later, the transformation was complete. Harrison Industries had acquired Whitmore's major contracts and hired Marcus and Sophia as promised. My father sold what remained of the company to pay off debts and regulatory fines, retiring to a modest condo in Florida with Elena. The country club did offer me honorary membership, which I accepted with the understanding that I would participate in their mentorship program for young entrepreneurs. My first speech was about building resilience and finding strength in adversity, with particular emphasis on the importance of surrounding yourself with people who value your character rather than your utility. But perhaps the most meaningful resolution came 6 months after the Forbes article, when I received a handwritten letter from my father. It was a genuine apology, written without Elena's influence, acknowledging his mistakes and expressing pride in my achievements. He asked for nothing in return and made no attempts at justification or excuse. I never responded to that letter, but I kept it in my desk drawer as a reminder that people can change, and that forgiveness is possible even when reconciliation is not. Today, my chosen family gathers monthly for dinner and celebration. We support each other through challenges and success, and we have built something stronger and more meaningful than any blood relationship based on obligation or expectation. Sometimes the greatest gift life gives you is showing you exactly who people really are. Once you know that truth, you are free to build something better than what came before. Have you ever experienced family betrayal that forced you to choose between acceptance and self-respect? How did you handle discovering that people you trusted had been working against you behind your scenes? Drop your thoughts in the fawning comments below, because I would love to hear about your own experiences with family karma and justice. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life tales of standing up for yourself and building the life you deserve. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that blood relationships do not automatically deserve loyalty if they are not built on mutual respect. Thank you for listening to my journey from family rejection to finding my true worth, and remember that sometimes losing the family you were born into is how you discover the family you were meant to have. Life has a way of teaching us that our greatest strength often comes from our willingness to walk away from situations that diminish our worth, and that real family is about who shows up for you, not who shares your DNA.